Until this point, I haven't really done anything except review a bunch of products on this channel, which while I view as objectively useful, I also view as fairly superficial. Today I want to talk about a behavior and lifestyle habit with far deeper weight and consequences, and something that objectively changed my life for the best. I'm talking about intermittent fasting, and I want to explain its role in my mental and physical health journey. Intermittent fasting, also known as time-restricted feeding, is the process of controlling when you eat. Specifically, it's doing this in a methodical or systematic way, and a pattern or rhythm, so to speak. In general terms, it means that you only eat during certain hours of the day and you repeat that behavior for a prolonged period of time to reap the benefits. I'll get into more details, but first I want to explain why I started following this pattern of behavior. Like most people's existential crises these last few years, this is a COVID story. We all experienced the lockdown and all the physical and emotional damage it caused us. After the first 6 months to a year of living in a state of pseudo-isolation and near total destruction of social normativity, I found myself in an extremely unhealthy state, both mentally and physically. I was searching for a lot of answers at the time, and one of the paths I followed revolved around diet. Until this point, I had only ever heard of fasting as a religious device and never put much thought into whether it served any tangible purpose. But when it was first introduced to me as a health concept, I was interested not only because it was a fresh idea, but because there is an immense amount of scientific literature surrounding the topic. I'm an engineer by trade, and I'd like to think I'm a rational guy, so science-supported ideas get my wheels turning. So I started experimenting on myself. Now let me talk a little bit about why you would actually do this. I'm going to give a hand-wavy description and then refer you to external sources for the grueling details. Okay, my read of the scientific literature is as follows. For many of the biological processes in your body follows a pattern called a circadian rhythm. The most popular formulation of this idea that most people have heard of relates to your sleep. Your sleep patterns follow a circadian rhythm, and that's why you fall asleep at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning. More or less. Obviously, there are a large number of variables and external factors at play, but we can all agree that in general, we fall asleep at night and wake up in the morning. It turns out, many other processes in your body also follow a pattern in this way. They are not necessarily tied to the strict day and night cycle, but many are. And by processes, I'm referring to complex reactions by which different chemicals and hormones are generated and spread throughout the body. And the relevant example here is the duality of states your body traverses depending on whether you are fasted or fed. When you are actively eating and while you are still digesting, your body undergoes a host of processes related to digestion and processing of the food and nutrients and energy. Alternatively, while you are fasted, meaning you're done digesting and have not eaten again, your body undergoes a host of processes related to cleaning and repair. One such example is autophagy, the process by which your body removes dead cells and even repurposes the materials for other cell functions. Again, I'm hand-waving here. I'm not trying to say autophagy strictly happens only when you're fasting and never when you're fed. Any and everything that happens in your body happens on a spectrum. But one conclusion to draw from the intermittent fasting body of research is that you can spend more time undergoing autophagy. The general point I'm trying to make is that there are certain crucial bodily functions that may be impaired if you're not paying attention to when you eat. Specifically, if you eat too much or eat all the time, essentially never allowing yourself to enter a fasted state or not fasting as much as you should. The overarching thesis of the intermittent fasting approach is to control the timing of your eating to ensure you allow your body to undergo critical processes for your short and long-term health. Research shows that intermittent fasting can lead to reduced risk of any number of conditions and diseases, from inflammation to cancer. Now that's just my layman's explanation of just a few points to consider. The absolute best thing you can do is read peer-reviewed research for yourself. It is as easy as just Googling around, and there are many resources out there. Also, if you just want to browse the web, there are no shortage of websites that explain things in a more holistic manner like I just did. However, if you really want an engaging and reputable resource for this topic, I would highly recommend listening to the Huberman Lab podcast. I'll drop a link below, but basically this Stanford professor just talks about it in deep detail while also keeping things palatable. And most importantly, he cites directly from specific scientific papers as well as surveys of the entire field of research. If you have a few hours to dedicate to this and you really care about your health, again, I can't recommend it enough. The Huberman Lab podcast is an absolutely excellent resource to learn about intermittent fasting as well as so many other aspects of health. Now let me explain what I actually do. I only eat within an 8-hour window throughout the day. You will find people and information talking about feeding windows of all different lengths, ranging from 12 to 10 to 6 hours, even 1 hour or one meal a day. Personally, I stick to 8, and there are studies to back up that specific time window. And again, although I'm regulating the timing, this is to say nothing about the specific foods I'm eating or how much of them. You should think of those as separate topics, which you should also address in the name of good health. It's generally recommended you not only pick a length of time window, but stick to that precise window every day. So in my case, for example, I choose to only eat between the hours of 12 noon and 8 p.m. So it's not just any 8 hours, it's that specific 8-hour window. There is a lot of information out there you can use to inform what window you might choose, but let me summarize one perspective. It seems to me that the most important fasting happens while you are asleep. So something you can do is stop eating early enough in the evening to ensure you're done digesting by the time you fall asleep. That way your body will be able to undergo all of its fasting related processes most effectively and at the most critical times. In general, you need to allow yourself several hours before your last meal and bedtime. I generally get to sleep around 11 p.m. or midnight, so I choose to stop eating at 8 p.m. 2 to 3 hours may be enough time, but depending on the size and content of your last meal, you may need 5 to 6 hours to digest according to some sources. The next thing I do is delay the intake of my first meal the next day. The way I look at it, I already put in the work to hold off on food the night before, and I've been fasting for 8 hours or more. Why not extend the fast as long as possible? In my case, I like to wake up anywhere between 6 and 8 a.m., and like I said, I don't start eating until noon. I'm not saying you have to make it 6 hours. Something easy you can try is just not eat until you're actually hungry in the morning, instead of instinctively force-feeding yourself breakfast like you've been doing for years. In general though, research seems to suggest you should wait about an hour after waking up before you take in your first meal. The longer you can reasonably go, the better. And on that note, intermittent fasting is not about starving yourself. You shouldn't put yourself in a situation where you're so hungry during your feeding window that you totally binge and wind up overeating compared to your normal regimen. Again, fasting is not about changing the amount of food you eat. It's just about controlling when you eat it. Okay, so is all of this work actually worth it? Well, to be honest, I wouldn't be making this video if it wasn't. This is something I'm really passionate about because of the positive impact it's had on my life. I feel like if I share my experience and it causes even one person to change their life for the better, then I've done a good thing. And I really believe that anybody can do this and reap some benefit from it. So how do I put this into words? I feel lighter, happier, more alert, more aware, sharper, more cognitively present, more physically ready to perform, higher energy, the list goes on. Plainly put, by not eating immediately in the morning, I feel like I'm allowing my body to wake up. I feel like I can actually think straight and do meaningful work. I flat out just perform better mentally and physically. I feel as though a literal and figurative weight have been lifted off my shoulders. The truth is, eating in the morning, and certainly overeating, makes me feel sleepy and sluggish, and like I never really woke up for the day. I can't eat breakfast and then be vigorously physically active either. And on the other side of things, I feel like I'm sleeping better too. Maybe there's something to be said about digestion taking energy or being a demanding process, because I really resonate with the idea that digestion distracts from your ability to heal. I really feel like I get a noticeably worse night's sleep when I go to bed on a full stomach. You can imagine how falling asleep on a meal that takes 6 hours to digest could mess with nearly your entire night's sleep. All of this is to say, my fasting pattern makes me feel more awake and alive, and like a highly functioning human being. It's made me significantly happier to live this way, and had a ripple effect on other aspects of my health. So how do you know when you're fasting? Well, for sure, if you just woke up from a full night's sleep and you haven't eaten, then you're fasting. You will continue to fast until you eat again. If you're having trouble prolonging your fast in the morning, there are a few things you can do to help maintain it. First of all, drinking water is totally fine. Also, you can turn to caffeine sources, both as a motivating distraction and as a minor appetite suppressant. If you're going to drink coffee, for example, you have to follow one rule: it has to be black. The basic science behind this is that anything that spikes your blood glucose level constitutes entering a state of digestion and leaving your fast. So a frappuccino with milk and sugar will definitely throw you off, but black coffee's fine. And personally, that's what I do. I usually like to have some espresso and sparkling water in the morning. Speaking of, sparkling water is another great tool you can use throughout the day to help curb appetite. Personally, I find that the fizzy water makes me feel full and less prone to snacking. But play around with that for yourself. Here's some food for thought for those that might still be skeptical of intermittent fasting, or even believe it could be dangerous. I like to think of it from an evolutionary perspective. We've been taught our entire lives that adult humans need about 2,000 calories a day, every day, in order to survive. Not to mention an entire host of macro and micronutrients. I'm not here to put on a tinfoil hat and tell you everything you've been told is a lie. The stipulation of the 2,000 calorie diet is true, but I'd argue it's true on average. What I mean is, think about how much time you spend day in, day out, shopping and cooking and meal prepping, sitting down to eat, etc. 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, forever? If you look back in time 10,000 years, or even 100,000 years or more, it just doesn't make sense to me. For the vast majority of our evolutionary biology, we just didn't eat that way. Food was scarce, and life was hard. We ate when we had food. We ate everything we could when we had it. Of course, our ancestors were able to get by, otherwise we wouldn't be here, but they certainly weren't eating 3 meals a day as part of a perfectly balanced 2,000 calorie diet. I think the truth is probably much closer to the idea that we grazed on food like nuts and berries and feasted on the occasional deer or whatever meat we could scavenge. I think the typical timing of our caloric intake was probably much more irregular than it is today. Sure, the tribe might kill a buffalo and eat like kings for a week, but then spend the next month eating fruits and root vegetables. There might have been times when we gorged ourselves on the meat of a fresh kill, only to go the next 2 days without food as we struggled to hunt for more. In today's terms, if you eat 4,000 calories on Monday because you had all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue for dinner, followed by cookies and ice cream for dessert, do you really think you need to eat a full 2,000 calories the next day? I just don't think so. I don't think our bodies process that energy that quickly on a 24-hour cycle. And of course, I'm talking about the average sedentary person. If you're extremely active, you might have a higher calorie requirement, but the point is, if you eat way beyond that one day, I would argue you may not need to meet your benchmark the next day. Our entire system of energy storage is to store fat when we overeat, and people who eat fewer calories than they burn lose fat. So the idea that if you operate under a short-term caloric deficit, you're just going to die is totally absurd. We're here thinking about this today because the human body actually does okay without needing you to constantly shovel hash browns in your mouth. Anyway, I'm not trying to tell you to eat less. I'm just suggesting we try to be mindful about when we eat. Ask yourself, am I actually hungry? As hard as it might be, think about eating as nourishment rather than a hobby. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Like and comment with any questions. I'm more than happy to help, and I'm sure I missed something. Please let me know if I can improve these videos in any way. If you'd like to support the channel, you should of course subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000. But if you'd like to go above and beyond, you can buy me a coffee using the link in the description. I appreciate every one of you. I hope I was able to help. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic day.